Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into the story of the 10th and Oregon crew out of South Philadelphia.
In Philly.
We got some really, fascinating source material on this group. Our plan is basically to give you the essential history, the key activities.
Put you up to speed.
Exactly. No fluff, just the stuff you need to know. You want to get the picture without getting totally bogged down. So let's jump in.
Okay, so the first thing I think that really stands out is how specific their origin is, like geographically specific.
Mm-hmm.
Founded in the 1960s, right?
Yeah.
By a guy named Rocco Turra. And the name itself,
Mm.
10th and Oregon Crew, it comes straight from that street intersection in South Philly.
Right, 10th Street and Oregon Avenue. So they weren't trying to be some huge sprawling thing from the start. Very local.
Hyper-local, yeah.
Ah,
And their base of operations, it stayed that way for a long time. South Philadelphia, obviously, but also stretching into those working-class Italian-American spots in South Jersey.
and the membership kind of reflected that too.
Totally. Predominantly Italian-American, our sources say, maybe with some Irish-American members mixed in, but definitely tied to that specific community, that background.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? Which brings up their relationship with the bigger Philadelphia crime family. How did that work?
Well, that's one of the more interesting wrinkles, actually. The sources consistently point out they were closely associated with the Philly mob.
Okay.
They knew each other, operated in the same world,
Yeah.
but they also seemed to keep a certain amount of independence. It wasn't like they were just a subsidiary branch.
More nuanced than that. So they weren't directly under the mafia's thumb, necessarily.
Seems that way. They had their own identity rooted in that neighborhood.
So what were they actually doing? What kind of criminal activities are we talking about?
Well, it's pretty much the standard menu for organized crime, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Drug trafficking was a big one. Extortion.
Like protection rackets.
Yeah, exactly. Shaking down businesses. Plus illegal gambling, loan sharking, street loans at crazy interest rates.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the heavier stuff. Murder, obviously. And labor racketeering, too.
Labor racketeering.
Yeah.
What does that typically involve in this kind of context?
It often means getting control of or influence within labor unions. Then you can misuse union funds, extort businesses through strike threats, manipulate contracts, that sort of thing. It's about leveraging the union for profit.
Gotcha. And they weren't exactly hiding in the shadows, were they? Where did they operate from?
No, they were pretty embedded in the local scene. Taverns, bars, restaurants, social clubs. These were their spots.
Places people knew.
Right. Meeting places, but also, fronts. Places to blend in and conduct business without drawing too much heat made them part of the fabric of the neighborhood in a way.
Let's talk about the founder again,
Yeah.
Rocco Turra. What do we know about him?
So the sources peg him as a South Philly career criminal, kind of came up through the ranks. And interestingly, he also had ties as a Teamsters enforcer.
Ah, the Teamsters connection. That always seems to pop up in these stories. What did being an enforcer mean there? Well, it likely meant he was involved in, shall we say, persuading people to align with the union's interests, sometimes through intimidation or even physical force. It's a role that often overlapped with organized crime, gave you connections, experience, and leverage.
Made you useful.
Exactly. Useful and maybe feared.
And there's a specific incident mentioned early on 1967. Turra was acquitted in a murder case, Robert to George.
Yeah, and what's really significant there is who he was acquitted alongside. Joseph Chicky Ciancaglini.
Ciancaglini. He became a big deal in the Philly family later on, didn't he?
A very big deal.
Yeah.
Future underboss, I believe. So that acquittal back in 67, it really hints at these early connections. These guys knew each other. They were running in the same circles way back then, maybe even covering for each other.
Suggests the lines were blurry from the start. Okay, let's jump forward a bit. The 90s seemed like a really turbulent time for the crew.
Oh, definitely. Things started getting heated. First, there was this conflict with another local group, the 12th and Wharton Street gang.
Just a neighborhood turf war.
Pretty much. Sources describe it as violent, back-and-forth stuff. Neither side wanting to give an inch. Typical street-level power struggle, but intense.
But then came the really big one, right? The feud with Joey Merlino.
Yeah, the Turra-Merlino feud. That seems to have kicked things into a whole different gear around 1995.
What set it off?
It apparently started when Louis Turra, who was leading the 10th NO crew by then, Rocco's son, I think.
Okay.
He was reportedly beaten up and robbed by some Merlino's guys. They took his Rolex. And the reason, Allegedly, Tura hadn't paid his mafia street tax.
Ah, the street tax. So basically paying tribute to the bigger organization for operating on their turf.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging the hierarchy, paying for, well, protection or at least tolerance. Refusing to pay or being unable to, that's a major challenge to someone like Merlino's authority. It's about respect as much as money.
And the Torres didn't take it lying down.
Not at all. According to the sources, Louis and his father, Anthony Turaraco's brother, I believe they reacted by plotting to kill Merlino.
Wow, okay. That's going directly against a major mafia figure, a huge gamble.
Incredibly risky. You're essentially declaring war. But the assassination plot never actually happened.
What went wrong for them?
Well, things took another turn. Louis Tura and some others got indicted, not for the plot, but for an unrelated murder and conspiracy case.
Okay.
And then while he was locked up waiting for trial, Louis Tura died, officially, an apparent suicide.
But there was suspicion.
Yeah, the sources mentioned speculation about, possible mafia involvement, someone silencing him, perhaps. It's hard to know for sure in those situations.
And it didn't stop there for the Tura family.
No, tragically not. Anthony Tura, Louis' father, he was gunned down.
Okay.
Assassinated while he was actually on his way to his racketeering trial.
Just taken out in the open.
Seems like it. And the police weren't ambiguous about it. Inspector Gerald Kane was quoted calling it flat out an organized crime assassination, a mob hit.
Chilling. Sends a clear message.
Absolutely. Don't cross the family. Most of the others indicted in that racketeering case eventually got convicted.
But not Merlino. He was charged in Anthony Tura's murder later, wasn't he?
He was, but he got acquitted, which again isn't entirely surprising in mob cases. Getting witnesses to talk, proving direct orders, it's really tough.
A messy, violent chapter.
Right.
But the Tenthano Cruz problems weren't just internal or with the mafia, right? They tangled with the pagans, too.
Yeah, that kicked off in the late 90s, a whole different kind of conflict. The Pagans Motorcycle Club, another group known for violence and territorial disputes.
What was the issue there? Drugs.
Mostly drugs and loan sharking turf.
Yeah.
The Pagans were apparently moving in on 10th and O territory, and things escalated quickly.
How so?
Well, sources mentioned 10th and O members getting beaten up at a bar owned by a guy named Eugene Genie Boy Miller.
Okay.
Then Miller himself gets targeted, beaten, pistol whipped, shot. It was getting really bloody.
Sounds like all-out war. Did anyone try to cool things down?
Interestingly, Joey Merlino apparently tried to step in, tried to broker some kind of peace deal between the two groups.
Merlino, after the feud with the Turas.
Yeah, maybe trying to assert his authority, or maybe just trying to stop the violence spilling over too much. But it didn't work. The peace talks failed.
And then what?
Then the Pagans president, Steve Gorilla Mondevergine, got shot.
Shot. Did they know who did it?
Well, Mondevergine knew the code. When the cops asked, he refused to name his attacker. Omerta, even between rival groups sometimes.
Right. Keep it on the street.
Exactly. But the violence continued. Mondevergine later tried to shoot a 10th, an Oregon guy, Johnny the Hat Hondry.
This just kept spiraling.
It did. Eventually, Mondevergine got arrested and went down in racketeering charges, partly related to all this chaos. And we should also mention, during this period, another 10th and O member, Nicky Slick DiPietro, was convicted for murdering someone named Tad Rice Green, just highlighting the real human cost of these turf wars.
Absolutely. Constant violence. So after all that, the feuds with Merlino, the war with the pagans, what happened to the crew? Did they just disappear?
Not disappear, no. But the sources say some of the leaders did temporarily relocate, moved out to Deptford Township in New Jersey for a bit.
Laying low, letting the heat die down.
Seems like a strategic move, yeah. Regroup, get out of the immediate line of fire after all that bloodshed.
But they came back.
Oh, yeah, the roots were in South Philly. They weren't gone for good.
Yeah.
And even after the whole Tura saga, they still showed flashes of that independent streak.
Yeah.
There's a report from 2002 about 10th and Oregon members actually beating up some associates of the main Philadelphia crime family.
Really? Even after losing the Turas? That's bold.
It suggests they weren't completely broken or absorbed, even then, still willing to push back.
And what about more recently? We have any sense of their activities in, say, the 2000s or 2010s?
Well, there's the case of Andrew McCauley. He was described as a former 10th and O member. He got caught up in a big sports betting operation, running it with the Philly crime family, actually, out of the Borgata Casino in Atlantic City.
Ah, Operation High Roller. I remember hearing about that.
That's the one. McCauley ended up getting sentenced. It shows they, or at least former members, were still active in illegal gambling, adapting, maybe even cooperating more closely with the main family on certain ventures.
So that cooperation might be a sign of things changing.
It could be. The sources seem to conclude that, yeah, the 10th and Oregon crew is still around, still active, especially in their old South Philly and South Jersey haunts.
Mm-hmm.
But there are increasing signs that they're becoming more integrated with the main Philadelphia Mafia. The lines might be getting blurrier.
So it's kind of evolved from this fiercely independent neighborhood crew
Right.
through these incredibly violent feuds to potentially being drawn closer into the orbit of the established mafia power structure. A long, complicated history.
It really is. And when you look back at it all, what's striking is how alliances shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
They fought with the Mafia, they fought against the Mafia, they fought other groups like the Pagans. It's this constant churn of power and territory.
Absolutely. And some of those moments really stand out, like the sheer nerve of plotting to kill Merlino, even if it backfired, or just the fact that they went toe-to-toe with both the established mafia and a major biker gang.
Yeah, that took some,
Yeah.
well, some combination of guts and recklessness, maybe. It really underlines how volatile that world is.
Definitely connects back for you, the listener, trying to grasp the dynamics of organized crime. It's not always monolithic. You have these smaller, localized groups carving out space, sometimes violently.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Think about how a group like this, the 10th and Oregon crew, manages to stick around for decades. Through all the violence, the arrests, the internal power struggles, what makes these hyper-local crews resilient? Is it community ties, adaptability, fear? What allows them to evolve or sometimes eventually fade? It kind of makes you reflect on the deeper structures, the underground economies that keep these things going.